So right now, a $20,000 piece of fiberglass with just a basic propeller is holding a multi-trillion-dollar global trade network completely hostage. I mean, think about that for a second.
Yes, wow.
We're watching the world's most advanced, like technologically superior navies being mathematically exhausted by cheap, commercially available drones in the Middle East. It is a complete inversion of modern military logic.
It really is. And, it forces us to rethink everything we assumed about globalized trade. I mean, we built this massive, hyper-efficient system of megaships and just-in-time supply chains,
Mhm.
assuming the oceans would just, remain safe forever. But efficiency is not the same thing as resilience.
Exactly. Which brings us to our mission today. We are jumping straight into a high-density strategic briefing based entirely on Chapter 29, which covers the Red Sea and Strait of Hormuz
Right,
crisis.
and we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do. The goal for you listening, whether you're prepping for an exam, maybe a policy meeting, or just trying to figure out why global inflation is ticking back up, is to master the exact mechanisms of maritime choke points.
Yeah.
We're unpacking a highly authoritative international relations text detailing Houthi proxy attacks, the terrifying reality of asymmetric warfare, the global shockwave of rerouting trade, and crucially, what this all means for India's strategic autonomy.
Right, and to really internalize this material, you need a mental map. We're going to trace a very specific analytical chain today.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So we start with geopolitics, right? The expansion of proxy warfare. Then we follow how that localized violence cascades into the global economy.
The riggering, the massive shipping reroutes, and inflation.
Exactly. From there, we examine the broader security implications and the erosion of international norms. And finally, we bring it home to the domestic impact, specifically, India's vulnerability and their strategic response.
So geopolitics to economy to security to domestic impact.
That's the chain.
Love it. Let's ground this in the physical world first. The geography here is destiny. We're looking at 4 interconnected arteries of global commerce.
And those are the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Suez Canal, and the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. And when you look at a map, it's actually shocking how fragile this all is. Like the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden, it's only about 18 miles wide at its narrowest point.
It's a tiny bottleneck.
Yeah, a massive container ship moving through there isn't just a target. It's practically a sitting duck.
And that geographic bottleneck is exactly what's being exploited here. The trigger event for this entire crisis involves Yemen-based Houthi forces attacking commercial vessels.
We're talking merchant ships and energy tankers.
Right.
But
Yeah. And they're using anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and unmanned aerial vehicles, drones.
right. Now, the source text notes their stated motivation is political, acting in support of Palestine and opposing Western and Israeli policies.
Yes, but when we look at the root causes and the strategic logic, this is really a masterclass in modern proxy warfare.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the actors involved. You have the Houthis, who are a non-state actor.
Right.
You have Iran, a regional power, acting as their primary backer and supplier. And on the other side, you have the United States and allied navies trying to act as the guarantors of maritime security.
Exactly.
But this is where the math gets terrifying. It's essentially a geopolitical toll booth being hijacked. I mean, if the U.S. Navy is burning $2 million interceptor missiles to shoot down a drone made of lawnmower parts that cost $20,000.
They're losing the financial war of attrition.
Yes, it's like trying to swat a swarm of angry bees using a solid gold tennis racket. You might hit the bee, but you can go bankrupt doing it.
I love that analogy. It perfectly captures the strategic dilemma because the technological barrier to entry for disrupting global trade has essentially collapsed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a non-state actor is using low-cost asymmetric means to exert proxy-based influence over global superpowers.
Right. And I have to push back a bit here, or at least ask the question, how sustainable are these allied convoy systems when the enemy's weapons are so asymmetrical and cheap?
Well, they're barely sustainable at all. Advanced navies are being forced to defend against simultaneous drone, cruise, and ballistic missile threats. To even survive in that environment requires something called integrated air and missile defense.
Okay, let's define that, because it sounds like generic military jargon, but the mechanism is fascinating.
It's highly complex.
Yeah, Integrated Air and Missile Defense, or IAMD, isn't just a guy looking at a radar and pushing a button to fire a gun. It's a massive floating supercomputer network.
Right.
You have to instantly link satellite data, ship-based radar, and airborne sensors to identify a target flying incredibly low to the water calculate its trajectory, and launch an interceptor in a matter of seconds.
And it has to do all of this across multi-domain operations, meaning coordinating across sea, airspace, and cyber domains simultaneously. The sheer operational intensity required just to keep a merchant ship afloat is staggering.
So if you're listening and sitting down to write an exam answer or a policy brief on the operational side of this crisis, examiners are looking for a very specific strategic vocabulary.
Yeah, the overarching framework you want to use is the rise of asymmetric maritime threats.
So what's the active recall question here?
Okay, active recall. Name the 4 interconnected arteries of global commerce we just mentioned.
That's the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, Suez Canal, and Strait of Hormuz.
Perfect. And if you need a 150-word answer framework on this to score high marks, you must anchor your analysis with specific terminology.
Give us the keywords to underline.
You need to explicitly detail how non-state actors are utilizing asymmetric means to achieve proxy-based influence.
Okay, non-state actors, asymmetric means, proxy-based influence.
Right. Then, pivot to the defense side by explaining that advanced navies are utterly dependent on integrated air and missile defense to survive within these complex multi-domain operations.
Using those precise terms demonstrates you grasp the underlying mechanics, not just the headlines. Okay, so the military math is clearly bad, but the commercial math is arguably even worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a missile fired in the Bab el-Mandeb doesn't just hit a whole town, it shatters the global supply chain.
Right?
When the world's major shipping companies looked at that golden tennis racket scenario, they realized the U.S. Navy could not guarantee a 100% interception rate. So they made a staggering logistical decision.
They essentially abandoned the Suez Canal.
Which is a profound shift. I mean, the Suez Canal normally handles about 12 to 15% of global trade.
Yeah.
Instead, these massive mega vessels are completely rerouting around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope.
We're effectively reverting to 19th century maritime trade routes to avoid 21st century drone swarms.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's walk through the mechanics of how a ship rerouting around Africa ends up making a flat-screen TV or a washing machine more expensive in Europe or Asia.
It's a direct cause and effect chain.
Right, so first, you add roughly 3,500 nautical miles to the journey. That adds 10 to 14 days of transit time.
And that extra time requires thousands of tons of additional bunker fuel per ship. But it's not just fuel. The insurance mechanism is critical here.
Oh, right, the war risk premium.
Exactly. When a waterway is declared a high-risk area, maritime insurers apply these premiums. Normally, this is a tiny fraction of a percent of a ship's total value.
Sure.
But in this crisis, those premiums spike to nearly 1% of the hull value.
Wait, really? 1%?
Yeah. So if you have a massive container ship worth over $100 million plus the value of the cargo, you are suddenly paying millions of dollars extra per voyage just for the insurance policy.
Wow. And the irony is that our modern globalized economy is uniquely vulnerable to this because of just-in-time manufacturing.
We treat maritime security like a commercial logistical issue.
But this proves it's the central pillar of global geopolitical stability. I mean, companies don't keep massive warehouses full of spare parts anymore. The container ship is the warehouse.
Right.
So when transit times jump by 2 weeks, factories literally run out of components and have to halt production lines. Increased transit time, plus astronomical fuel costs, plus spiking insurance premiums equals global inflationary pressure.
And we have to layer on the secondary overlapping threat outlined in the source text, which is the Strait of Hormuz.
Right, because while the Red Sea handles a massive volume of manufactured goods, the Strait of Hormuz is the vital artery for global energy.
It is the primary gateway for oil and liquefied natural gas coming out of the Gulf.
So the container ships going around Africa cause inflation and supply chain headaches. But if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, we aren't talking about delayed sneakers, we're talking about global energy markets going into cardiac arrest.
It's the ultimate geo-economic vulnerability, which is why the institutional and legal dimensions of this crisis are so vital.
Expand on that a bit.
Well, the entire global economy relies on a foundational institutional norm, which is freedom of navigation. It's a core principle of maritime security. But with Iranian involvement backing the Houthis and Western navies striking Houthi targets, the risk of wider regional escalation is immense.
A localized shipping crisis could easily spiral into a broader conflict.
Exactly, involving Israel, the Gulf states, and major global powers, the weakening of these maritime institutions is a massive threat.
Okay, so bringing this back to exam strategy. If you need to draft A structured 250-word response on the economic fallout. What's the active recall question?
The question is, what specific economic consequences result from rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope?
And the heading you want to use is Geoeconomic Impact of Maritime Chokepoint Disruptions.
Yes, a classic intro-body conclusion structure works best here.
Walk us through it.
In your intro, define the vulnerability of maritime choke points and the concept of just-in-time supply chains.
Got it.
In the body, sequentially link the cause and effect chain. Detail the Cape of Good Hope rerouting, the specific mechanical drivers of costs like fuel and war risk insurance, and how that translates into global inflation.
And the conclusion.
Elevate your answer by connecting the Red Sea commercial disruptions to the broader energy security risks in the Strait of Hormuz, emphasizing the institutional threat to freedom of navigation.
Excellent. And tracing that global shockwave leads us perfectly into the final and perhaps most critical link in our analytical chain, the domestic impact on India.
Because India is sitting squarely in the crosshairs here.
Right. If you look at India's geographical position and its economic engine, the vulnerability is extreme.
It's profound. India imports roughly 80% of its crude oil requirements.
80%.
Yeah. A massive percentage of that energy, along with vital trade connecting India to Europe and the Middle East, flows directly through these two specific maritime corridors.
So a drone strike in the Bab el-Mandeb isn't just some distant geopolitical event.
No, it's a direct threat to India's energy security, its domestic inflation rate, and its overall macroeconomic stability.
So what does this all mean for India? I mean, if I'm sitting in New Delhi, I'm watching my primary energy lifelines simultaneously light on fire.
Yeah.
And the strategic dilemma is acute. India is aggressively pursuing strategic autonomy, this idea that it can make independent foreign policy choices in a multipolar world. But how autonomous can you truly be if your energy security and trade routes are at the mercy of proxy groups and external powers?
You've hit on the central geopolitical friction. This is why the source material emphasizes that maritime security in the Indian Ocean region, the IOR, is no longer just a naval concern.
Right.
It is the prerequisite for strategic autonomy and economic multipolarity. India's immediate response requires securing its sea lines of communication.
Universally referred to as SLOCs.
Exactly, SLOCs.
Okay, let's break down the playbook for securing those SLOCs, because the text outlines some very specific administrative and policy requirements. First on the list is a massive enhancement of maritime domain awareness, or MDA.
Right, and to understand MDA, think of it as turning the lights on in a pitch-black room.
Okay.
A Navy cannot defend against a threat it cannot see. MDA is the comprehensive intelligence picture.
So we're talking networking satellite surveillance, coastal radar chains.
Long-range maritime patrol aircraft like the P-8I, and intelligence sharing with international partners.
Yeah.
All of that to detect a drone swarm or a hijacking attempt hundreds of miles before it reaches an Indian vessel.
But seeing the threat is only step one. Step two is sustained naval deployments. The Indian Navy has massively ramped up its presence in the Arabian Sea, deploying guided missile destroyers and frigates to escort flag vessels.
They have.
But I have to be honest, pushing back on the implementation challenges here, it seems daunting.
Oh, it is.
It's one thing to recognize the need for electronic warfare and anti-drone tech, but transitioning a legacy Navy into an adaptable, multi-domain force mid-crisis is a massive strategic dilemma.
Yeah.
I mean, the legacy fleets of most major navies, India included, were built to fight other massive ships or submarines. You can't just install a software patch on a 30-year-old frigate and suddenly make it immune to a low-flying, radar-evading drone swarm.
That legacy infrastructure is exactly the vulnerability being exposed right now. The Red Sea crisis is essentially a live-fire stress test for global navies.
Wow.
And the overriding lesson, which you must highlight in any exam analysis, is the urgent need for naval modernization.
So let's focus on just building heavier ships.
Exactly. The future of naval deterrence is about integrating electronic warfare capabilities to jam drone signals, developing directed energy weapons like lasers that cost pennies per shot, and building technologically adaptable forces.
And this ties directly into India's broader domestic policy of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliance, right?
Yes, absolutely.
If India relies entirely on imported multi-million-dollar Western interceptor missiles to defend its shipping, the cost will drain the defense budget overnight.
They have to develop indigenous, cost-effective anti-drone systems. They need resilient supply chains.
And furthermore, This crisis accelerates the need to deepen maritime partnerships across the Indo-Pacific, leveraging platforms like the Quadway and even BRICS dynamics to share intelligence and burden share the security of these vital trade routes.
Exactly. The localized tactical threat necessitates a comprehensive strategic overhaul.
So, if you're structuring notes or writing an exam answer on India's specific policy response, how do we format that?
A bullet point format works incredibly well here to demonstrate breadth of knowledge. The heading should be India's strategic maritime preparedness.
Let's give them the final revision capsule on this. There are 5 absolute must-include administrative terms to prove you get the big picture.
First is maritime domain awareness, MDA.
Second is securing sea lines of communication, SLOCs.
Third is the absolute necessity of naval modernization, specifically focusing on electronic and anti-drone warfare.
Fourth is the broader economic goal of building resilient supply chains and Amanabar Ferat.
And fifth, grounding all of this within the geopolitical theater of the Indian Ocean region, the IOR.
Weaving those 5 concepts together signals to anyone reading your analysis that you understand the trade security linkage. You recognize that protecting merchant shipping is the bedrock of national economic growth.
Exactly right.
All right, we've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the mechanics of drone warfare to the nuances of global supply chains. Let's bring it all together and run a rapid revision recap to lock this analytical chain in your memory.
Let's trace it sequentially.
Go for it.
The crisis initiates with the trigger event. Houthi proxy groups utilizing highly asymmetric, low-cost means to target commercial shipping.
And that geopolitical violence instantly disrupts the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Suez Canal, forcing the massive logistical shift, rerouting global shipping thousands of miles around the Cape of Good Hope.
Right. Which fundamentally alters the economic math. Extended transit times, combined with massive fuel consumption and skyrocketing war risk insurance premiums,
directly ignite global supply chain disruptions and inflationary pressures, while the looming threat over the Strait of Hormuz threatens global energy security.
Exactly. And finally, that shockwave hits domestic shores, specifically exposing India's extreme vulnerabilities regarding imported energy.
Which forces an immediate strategic response centered on maritime domain awareness, securing sea lines of communication, and urgent technology-driven naval modernization to ensure strategic autonomy in the Indian Ocean region.
Geopolitics to economy to security to domestic impact. That is the complete cause and effect chain.
Incredible. We started this deep dive talking about the sheer physics of global trade, this assumption that millions of tons of cargo moving across the oceans possess an unstoppable momentum.
Yeah.
But the Red Sea crisis has proven that our hyper-efficient globalized system is actually built on a foundation of glass.
And that glass is currently being shattered by off-the-shelf drone technology.
Which leaves us with a final strategic question for you to mull over. We've seen a non-state actor successfully choke a massive artery of global trade using relatively primitive asymmetric technology.
Right.
So how long until every strategic choke point worldwide, from the Malacca Strait to the Panama Canal, faces similar asymmetric threats? And what does the very concept of superpower deterrence look like when the cost of attacking the system is pennies, but the cost of defending it runs into the billions? Think about that next time you order something online.